Actually, we seem to have already done this particular show today. We would have taken an off because we did it, or we did have a very great conversation online. I stand here knowing that we do not have much time left to be able to conclusively have this conversation. And of course, it has to do with the media and of course, Africa as a continent. But before we get deeper into this conversation, for those who have not been able to see that video that is actually setting the tone for this conversation which President Paul Kagame did have at the African Union of Broadcasting General Assembly that took place right here in Rwanda.
To speak for yourself, you need your own mouth. You can't just, be there and then tell somebody else, you give them a signal that they should speak for you. I mean, it doesn't make sense. We need our own content. We need our own way of transmitting that, not only to the people of Africa, but to the outsiders. What we have had for far too long again is the outsiders owning our mouths that should be telling our stories, and they end up telling our story the way they want, not the way it is. It's as simple as that.
Right, that is the basis of our conversation tonight. It is an interactive show. Tweeters, use the hashtag InFocusRW. I'll be able to sample those tweets in the course of the program. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangua. Let me introduce my panelists on the program. Who is actually the second Vice President of the African Union of Broadcasting. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
He's also the Director General of Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. Also with us is Natalie Rodriguez, who's a political analyst and a businesswoman. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're from Jamaica. You'll help us get the
Yes.
Caribbean island perspective of this.
But also I'm a Pan-Africanist.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Also with us is Thierry Gatete, coming in on the program, not the first time, blogger and researcher. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And Dr. Christopher Kayumba, a communication consultant and, of course, a scholar as well. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
I want us to have this conversation and definitely start off with where, we have had Gatete come out publicly, writing pieces here and there. He supports the move to have, in fact, you've even given it a name, the African News Network, ANN. Why do you think this is a viable idea that can work and help, deal with the issues that Africa has as far as the misconception about the continent are concerned?
Right, so I think, first of all, that's an exciting business opportunity. Mm-hmm. So let's not look at it as something that we must do for ideological reasons. It is an exciting business opportunity. It's a business in itself, in making money for itself. But it's also a place that offers exposure to African talent, African wealth, African business. So not only will it make money for itself, but it will also make money for the entire continent. That's one way of looking at things. Because Africans on the global marketplace, where we're supposed to trade ideas, trade thinking, trade goods and resources. Everyone must come with an advertising department. Africa does not have. As a result, African resources are debased so that they are both cheaper than resources from other societies. And by resources, I mean physical, but also mental resources.
Right.
So we need a platform to advance Africa's wealth.
A platform to advance Africa's wealth. And I'm seated next to a Director General of a platform that actually has been there. We have Radio Rwanda celebrating 55 years. Now, if we're talking about creating a platform that would do what Gatete is doing, then is this a signal, Arthur, that the already available platforms have failed to do that?
Let me first start by disagreeing with my friend Gatete. I don't think if we start looking at it from a business point of view, we're getting it wrong. Because even the established networks that we know are not really business whims.
They're not doing well.
Al Jazeera is financed 100% by the Qatari government. The BBC is financed $7 billion by license fee. CNN is cable. They get money from every household that watches CNN. So the business side, in terms of commercial advertising, is not viable now for such a network. However, it's important that you have, like what the president was talking about, that you have this platform that brings out the African stories. But for me, even having the platform is one thing, because it's simple. And put it on the satellite, put it over internet. It's very simple. The question is, what do you put there? Mostly. Local channels in Africa, you find that almost 50% or even 60% of the content they carry is foreign content. So how are we able to even generate our own content such that from a small scale, we can even be sharing content Mexico or these other big soaps from Europe? How can I be able to say, I pick a story from Kenya that's talking about Kenya and done by Kenyans that I can run on my platform here? How can I be able to pick a story from Cote d'Ivoire that is done by I can use in my channel here? Even if we started at that small scale, then the bigger one of the CNN or Aljazeera can come. But it comes when you already have something that you're starting with, and that should be a small platform where you can be able to share
your content.
But the most important thing here is, how does Africa generate its content? And like I said, content is very expensive to
generate. So in other words, you're diplomatically saying that right now is not the time, we are not ready for such
No. It's what I'm trying to say is that the bigger platform is very simple to create, because the infrastructure is there, internet is there, satellites are there. The most important thing is what are you putting on that platform?
What are you putting on the platform? Natalie, when you had this whole idea, you know, we've seen several people even who have been participating in this conversation online saying that this seems like a pipe dream, never ever, it will not work. You know, we talk about Africa having 55 countries. How do we mobilize all of them to go towards the same direction? How do we do this? Do you also see it as a pipe dream, as something that is just a...
No, I think it's actually a necessity for a race. The time is now. We are always delaying, waiting on the right time. It's like when a family keeps saying, oh, we need to wait to have children. When exactly is the right time? Africa is on the cusp right now where we are the biggest, the fastest growing population group in the world. Now is the time. It's whether or not we set it as a priority. And the clip you showed from President Kagame is absolutely right. We cannot keep blaming the West for all our problems, because the West controls the message that goes out. The image of Africa right now is of poor people who are always fighting each other. It's not to the benefit of anyone except Africans to change that message. The only way you can change that message and actually start to grow is if you carry your own message. And yes, right now, media as practiced traditionally is not profitable. But what that leaves us to do as a people is to ensure that we find ways for it to be possible. It's not going to be the Al Jazeera or the CNN as exists now. It's going to have to take a new form.
It's going to have to take a new form.
It has to take a new form to be viable, but it is very, very necessary, because if we remember the role of media, one, to disseminate information. Even Africans from other countries don't know amazing things that are happening in other countries. So we need that to disseminate information among ourselves and to the outside world. Also, a part of the role of media is to help to act as a check and balance for governments and policymakers. That doesn't really exist now. You more find that media are either feeling as though they're muffled or they're bringing the message that they're being told to bring. That is not good for accountability and for this region to grow in any form or fashion.
This continental network will do this job?
It should, if done properly, and that's why I'm afraid of saying it should be an Al Jazeera or a CNN. Because if you go that route, it is going to take too long. It has to take its own route, and it has to be done. And one thing Africa has going, learn to set our agenda the way we want it. So our media house that is going to be for the region to carry our message should have its own voice and be done in a way that works for us. It should not be competing with the Western way of doing things.
Perfect. Dr. Christopher, for you, you're one of those who are sort of pessimistic about this whole idea. You feel like it can't work.
I wouldn't say pessimistic first. Optimist, but I think from this discussion here, you see Arthur has a view that is, I think, more practical. Then my brothers and sisters here, they are also talking about the network now. It's urgent. Let me first remind that I have been to many conferences where this issue is discussed, both in Rwanda and outside. And of course, you can see these different issues. Let me also first remind that in 1963, a Pan-African news agency was formed, and it was even revamped in 1979. It has its seat in Dakar. Who among you has read a post? Who subscribes to this news agency? And why don't our Pan-Africans subscribe to it?
Why don't they?
When was it the last time that RBA, Rwanda TV, Radio Rwanda, and these other radio ever used any post from those? Why is it not working? So let me say three things, therefore, about an African network. If you want to start it, first understand it from three standpoints, from what I have been observing over time. Number one, there is a standpoint that is driven by an emotive, populist, and a need for that. There is also...
Why do you call it emotive, populist?
Because when you look at it, even to divide Africans among those who are real Pan-Africanists and Africans who are at heart whites. So they are black masks in white skin. So they tend even to divide that. Then there is also ideologically driven Africans, Pan-Africans of the old mode who come from the liberation struggle and who, in fact, started the Pan-African News Agency and who are also the fathers of the liberation struggle. Those ones started thinking about this network even before independence. Remember, before independence, those who fought for Africa's liberation, they promised Africa that the media outlets that we have are owned by colonizers. Once we take over, you will really have a even within countries. But as we talk now, even within countries, the media outlets are contested territory. Let us first look at Africa. We say we have 54 countries. How many of those countries have really a vibrant media? And finally, the third standpoint,
yes.
It is the objective, practical, realizable view of this African network, which brings me to Arthur's point,
right,
that we must think about the cost. We must think about who is going to manage it.
Right.
The 55 countries will sit at AU, and if they cannot even agree on a simple thing about a market where all of them can, how will they take? Will you have an editorial that is determined by these 53 countries?
Right,
and they vote for about these
very
things?
key questions right there. I saw Natalie, you wanted to jump in. Of course, he brings in very important issues.
Very, very important issues, but they cannot be overridden. We can't sit back and allow our history to be written and our stories to be told by others, because up to maybe 6 months ago, no one thought that the agreement signed here in Kigali a few weeks ago would have ever happened. No one would ever have thought we'd be talking about open airspaces on this continent. So it is not impossible, but we have to first examine what are the reasons we have not had this so far. It's a matter of money. It's a lack of skill in the region, which we have to face as a real thing. A lot of the real talent leave because they make more money abroad.
Yes.
And those that stay are not making any money, so they eventually leave and go into consulting and other areas. And then we also have the matter of freedom of expression is stifled in a lot of countries. If you address the barriers to setting it up one by one, and also this cannot be on the AU. I personally, as I said to you earlier, do not believe that a broadcasting network for the continent should be funded by governments. Because if it is funded by governments, you have the same problem of stifling freedom of expression. When you have a random leader who decides that there's this beautiful press conference, self-aggrandizing, and all of that, and you're forced to do it as a media host, you lose credibility.
Right.
So you have to find another mechanism. Maybe you have to have a levy through the AU for a certain period of time to get the media house off the ground.
Right.
But it shouldn't be controlled by governments any at all.
Never. I mean, Arthur, I mean, for you, what sort of model then should we be thinking about?
You see, Eugene, I think we might have been overtaken by time. We should stop thinking about the notion of mass media anymore.
Exactly.
It has moved from mass media to personal media. Everybody has access to media. Anyone can be a journalist, can tell a story. But when you look at, I mean, the trend is digital.
Yes.
How many Africans are fighting the war on the digital platforms? When you look at statistics, data is very good. People on this planet that are active on only 9% are Africans. And the story is there. Donald Trump appoints people from Twitter. And I mean, today's debate was carried out on Twitter. It almost concluded on Twitter today. So I think we should run away from the traditional mass media platforms
Exactly.
into how do we think of coming up with good digital platforms for Africa. Where is the Alibaba of Africa?
Right.
I mean, we post on YouTube, it's not ours.
Right.
We post on Facebook, it's not ours. The Chinese artists have the Alibaba. So we must be thinking, you know, where the world is headed. But when we keep talking about the traditional media that is fading out, then we might be missing the point.
We might miss the point. So if you, I mean, I know
Let
you
me give a
are-
few statistics. You
Yes.
know, Facebook, very important. A lot of debate on it. 1.6 billion people, only 120 million in Africa. Instagram, that is taking the world, 800 million, I think, the last data I saw. Only 7 point something in Africa. This is where the story is. And if Africa does not have, or Africans cannot embrace these tools and be part of this digital infrastructure, then we definitely are not going to be able to tell our story.
Right. So as we were listening to President Kagame saying that to speak for yourself, you need your own mouth. We need our own content. We also need our own way of transmitting that.
So you did your own Alibaba.
So I want to hear now what sort of models, what sort of plans, what sort of ways do we create that platform? What sort of platform would it even be like? You know, what model
Right,
will it
so-
look like?
So a television is one, which is why it's a news network. A television is one
Of the platform.
of the platforms that any news network has, and the television remains to date the most credible source. I hear colleagues talking about several platforms, and these platforms are influential and strong, but the most credible source of information to date remains the television. Which format?
Depends in whose view.
If news is communicated by the New York Times, by the CNN, by Aljazeera, that news is going to influence decisions that are going to happen right next after that. That news is going to influence stocks. That news is going to influence some countries' wars.
So in your opinion, this platform that President Paul Kagame was talking about would be television?
No.
What sort of platform can we use?
So every one of the televisions that we know have all the platforms across the board. So a television is one item. This television also has a Twitter space, an Instagram space, a Facebook space, and so on. But there is no deliberate. There hasn't been a deliberate African project to do this. Once you do this, the numbers of peoples who are present on these platforms that we talk about and the format with which you receive the information will be supported, backed up by a source of information. Because when Africans go on Twitter, they retweet sources of information that are from outside Africa. But when you have an African source of credible information, Africans have authority and confidence in using that as the ground to discuss. But a few points I want to make. One.
Very quickly, yes.
All these ideas are good. All of them. I can't disagree with any of these ideas. However, these ideas, however brilliant they are being discussed on Rwanda television, which means they will reach the minimum amount of people ever. In fact, if we had a television that broadcast worldwide, these brilliant ideas that I all agree with would have a much bigger impact. One more thing, I hear people said that Africa cannot have a big television network because media is still stifled. Done a bit of research to understand where these other big countries like Qatar is a country of Sharia law and where where I can go, but that's not the purpose of this show.
Yes.
So but it didn't stop Aljazeera from being one of the leading. Same thing, BBC the same thing. So all these ideas, all these ways of collecting information are good, but these ideas need an incubator, a space. And that space is, the army have a theory of hitting the ground running. Let's start this platform. And then all these ideas will find their space in that media
Let's start.
network.
Dr. Kayumba, he says, let's start. And he says, it will by Africans to do it. Do you think we have that time, looking at all the other issues? Because someone was tweeting also saying that we have other bigger problems. This is not our priority. I mean, this is one of the, we have many other issues to deal with as Africa. We are putting the cart ahead of the horse. We have other issues to sort out as we speak.
Yeah, I think as an idea, it is a brilliant idea. Let us have Africans come together and set this up. Please, it is a very brilliant idea. In practice, who are the Africans are we talking about? Look at the history of the media. Who started BBC? And why has it succeeded? And by the way, BBC did not start as a public broadcaster. It started as a company, a private company. And then it ran into troubles of finance. It started in 1922 as a private company. Then in 1927, it became a public broadcaster. Why has it succeeded? Partly because it has reliable funding from the state, but also because the original Director General understood the importance and the relationship between power, those who hold power, and successful broadcasting. So at the time, getting information was very hard. So the radio, BBC gained trust among the public because it was offering them information, especially about World War II and the strike at the time. Yet that radio was also stifling the Labour Party. Look also at CNN. CNN succeeded because somebody who had money put his money in. He's talking about Qatar. But any news about Qatar on Aljazeera, there is a deal. There is a deal between the state of Qatar and Al Jazeera. Go and report about the world. Leave issues of Qatar to Qatarians. Have you ever seen them asking, Al Jazeera asking them why they don't hold elections? So, therefore, these are three models, therefore. If we are going to succeed with this model, either we think about a public broadcaster, probably we might have a Pan-African leader who will say, for me, I am going to invest in this as somebody who believes in an African idea. Then he will start it as a person who is leading a country, put his money there like the Emir of Qatar has done it. Or we will get a rich person. For example, this man of bribing African leaders to leave power. If he had invested this money in a media outlet, I think it would work. Finally, let me also say
Yes, very quickly.
that the media is moving towards media convergence. We're talking about TV, then a newspaper, Twitter.
Yes.
Media convergence means this platform we are here on TV, but this content could also be put on a newspaper. So radio, other TV should be a TV, a radio, and a newspaper. So since we are moving towards media convergence, we shouldn't exclude TV,
Right.
we shouldn't exclude radio, but we should produce content for all platforms, including Twitter. That's why you need clever people,
Right.
young people, who can, for example, summarize a show into 3 tweets.
Right.
But I think also what has to happen on the continent is that the caliber of journalism has to be lifted.
It has to be lifted.
It has to be lifted.
How? Let's
Because
go.
it starts training. And also, it's also setting high standards and a lot of egos being put aside. Because you have a lot of vanguards of journalism now in Africa who are okay with substandard writing and substandard production of material. And the only way you're going to be taken as credible is if you lift the standard that exists with what is being produced. Content, as you said, Arthur, is king. Content is king, but the content has to be of a high enough standard so that it can stand against exist. And also you have to deal with the matter of freedom of expression. Because there are several countries where there are so many things on the books which prevent journalists from reporting. There are some things that are explicitly on the books, and there are some subtle things that are people just know you don't talk about those
don't
things.
touch
publicly.
those areas.
You don't touch those areas. And until you lift those, it is going to be hard to do it. And of course, the issue of money.
And that is
Right.
about the African story. What is it about? Media does not report about a single story. Media reports about stories. How about reporting on a continent that has 54 countries? How can you talk about a single story? If you look at what most people who are talking about this single story are talking about,
Who talked about the single story? Excuse me.
the African story.
Yeah, but the African story is the story of the 54 countries.
What is
it's
that
not
story?
it's different and it's diverse from day to day.
There's no one who talked
There
about
is
the
no
single
one
story.
story of Africa.
Eugene,
It's a combination of many things happening on the region.
Yes, I think the people who say that are those who feel that the Western media has portrayed Africa for far too long
On a single story.
a negative light.
A single track.
Yes. This platform would be able to deal with that particular issue of telling the African story of what really is about. I think that is where he's coming in and saying, what of those countries where things don't look right? Would this platform comfortably report about that? This is definitely what
And
he's
as
trying to
someone,
ask.
this is my first time living on this continent. What I thought of Africa and what is Africa are completely different. And I think that I'm relatively well educated, well informed, but I can tell you, having grown up in the West, on the doorsteps of the United States, what I am seeing and witnessing for myself. And when I share stories, I always say this, my mother visited Rwanda and she was in shock. And sometimes, when she went back home and she was sharing a couple of things, for example, of what Rwanda was like, people looked at her like, I don't know you to be a liar, but I don't think that's actually true. That's not Africa. And so with the story
And the
of
Africa
the
they
real
had
Africa
was created by the kind of stories that were being told by the Western
For
media.
example, Rwanda, what Rwanda is now, most of the world does not know. When we were told we were coming to Rwanda, when this was our new posting, people felt sorry for us. We were going to come here and suffer. I'm not suffering. Do I look as though I'm suffering? So the story has to get out as to what the real Africa is.
And who has to tell this story?
Africans have to tell the story of the fact that you're not here suffering. Most of the people are not malnourished. You're not walking on the street and killing each other. And that the countries are growing. You take it for granted because you live here and you know the true story. I'm telling you, in the West, there are a lot of people who think the life here is really hard. When I say to people, I drive my car and I don't drop in a pothole, they look at me not quite convinced, because your streets must all be unpaved, filled with potholes. Your life must be hard. And a very simple thing like the climate. Can I tell you? When I say to people, oh my gosh, I'm so cold tonight. What? Where are you? Aren't you in Africa? because you're supposed to be so hot that you're walking half naked on the street, fanning yourself because you're terribly hot. So there are simple things that people don't know about this continent. People will not see pictures of Rwanda and believe that that is a country in Africa. Right. And we have to get that message out.
You asked Chris a very interesting question. Who should set up this platform?
Yes.
And maybe let's go by the examples of what we know. Let's go by the big television networks that we know. Russia Today is an emerging strong network across the world. It's financed 100% by the Russian government. You've talked about Aljazeera.
Chinese Xinhua.
Financed by Qatar. You know. So I think the responsibility for now, if you had started, lies squarely in the hands of the leadership of the continent. Because the initial capital, the initial investment into such a project is huge. In 1996, when Al Jazeera was starting, they injected in $137 million. I mean, today, that's an equivalent of almost $1 billion. So you ask yourself, which African investor, which African entrepreneur is willing to sink money into such a project and wait over a long period of time to get a return on investment? I don't know if Dangote would be able to sink $200 million into a project where he's going to wait for almost 10 years to get returns.
Get returns on investment.
Yeah, so the private sector would have been ideal. But the cost of having a professional, credible, respected channel is huge. The cost of investment is quite huge.
So governments, I mean, squarely
that's
have
why
a
for me,
bigger role.
For me, I look at it from the political side, as opposed to the private sector side.
Right.
Because of the cost of investing into such a network.
What would be the dangers of this if the African leadership were to take that initiative and say we're going to sink in money and put it up?
I think if it were a leader, I think it would work. But if you say,
Chris, sorry, let me cut you short.
Yes.
You talk about governments. It's either Nigeria or South Africa or Egypt, the big economies of Africa.
Why?
To do that? I mean,
Why?
they have the money.
Qatar is not the richest Arab country to set up. Russia Today, Russia is not the biggest European.
Are you trying to say that Qatar is not rich?
I'm saying this. How much does an aircraft of Rwanda cost? One aircraft.
It's a huge loan that the government takes back.
No, one aircraft of Rwanda.
Let's get
200 million francs.
Yes.
Every single government on the African continent can actually have 200 million to invest in a project whose return is beyond the actual project. And that's why I started it with a business, as a business model. When we asked President Kagame, when Rwanda was investing in Rwanda Air, why is Rwanda Air not bringing return on investment? Here's his answer. We invested in Rwanda Air for other sectors of the economies to make profit. Rwanda Air's impact cuts across the ripple effect is huge on the tourism, the hotel, on all sorts of other sectors.
Yes.
This media house.
Yes.
Many people don't invest in Africa, not because of what they saw on television, because the story of Africa, the story of Africa, but if you have a media that shows you the story of opportunity, the story of a young people who are hungry and ready to work.
And this is that media
this
invested
media's
in by
job.
African
and
governments.
those medias that you talk about that have the African single story, dishonest competition, because they want to keep the investment within the environments that they promote. They won't promote competition. Africa is competition, but does not have a marketing agency. If we invest $200-300 million dollars, the Rwandan government has that money. Every African government has that money. You will have 10 years of setting up After 10 years, your economy will be vibrant. But I have a very important point to add, in my opinion.
Yes, yes.
It's a matter of national security. When you have, instead of trying to, like North Korea trying to create a nuclear weapon, if you have a strong media, it's much more potent, much more powerful, and to ensure your security than any of the weapons. I mean, Saddam, Gaddafi, and all these people had all these weapons.
Yeah.
But the media is a much bigger shield, much more stronger tool to use.
Right. Before you come in, Doctor, let me bring in Natalie, because she is strongly opposed to governments having their hand in this project. And you're hearing Gatete say that, you know what, these governments have this money. Arthur here says, you know what, it's a big investment and no single private investor is ready to actually sink in that kind of an amount of money. I mean, when you listen to this kind of points of view, I mean, what is running through your mind?
What's running through my mind is I am against any government being in control of the voice of the region. Mm-hmm. So you're right. If we were to just turn to governments, you'd have to turn to the big guys, the Nigerias, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. However, if you go another route where you probably put a levy on whatever, I can't say what, you put a levy and governments or whatever, but it has to be a quota system. It can't just be a big country putting in most of the money because then they control it, right? So I think if you go that and you have an actual plan where this happens for a period of time, and then over time that media house or those media houses become independent after, say, 10 years or something, that could possibly work. But I think, adding on to what Gatete has said, we have to stop looking at media as an end in itself, as a tool for development, as a tool for promotion of possibilities. The population on this continent is young. There's a great need for opportunity. So you have to, just as the way you have within a government, you have a tranche that looks at youth development, you have ICT development, you know, sports, education. Media must form a part of your development mechanism. Because remember, the role of the media is check and balance for government and policymakers, as well as promoting ideas, promoting what, you know, disseminating information. Yes. And so we have to stop seeing it as just TV and news. Yes. It is a part of the whole package of developing this region and providing opportunities, because we cannot keep having the images on the television where in Africa you're at war, you're fighting against each other, people are hungry. We have to get the message out, and we can't leave it to the Western media to carry our message for us.
Right. Let me say three quick things.
Yeah.
First,
why don't you do two for now?
For governments, for
Yes.
example, for governments,
Yes.
governments owning these African governments, I think if that were to happen and the African leaders decide that they want this, which I think is unlikely, you would have a TV station, a forum that is talking about maybe issues of irrigation and soil erosion and about these meetings and how leaders are important. Right. Because when you think about what is happening within borders of these countries, you will find that most of these governments are fighting day to day with journalists. So how do you expect people who, for example, if you are going to talk about the story in Burundi, Nkurunziza now they defined him as visionary. The media is defining. So you would have a media that is saying is visionary. In South Sudan, they are talking about the problem is about these rebels. It is not with Salva Kiir. So, and I can promise you, if it ever happens, even leaders would not watch this. Secondly, the issue of money. You know, Aljazeera started with $137 million US. But the problem is not actually starting a media outlet. It is how to maintain it. How do you sustain it? You can start it now. Now, I was telling you about the Pan-African News Agency. When it was started, all African leaders were happy, they celebrated. But have you ever seen African News Agency sending stories from, and it is everywhere. It has offices in Dakar, finally. Me, I think, for the idea of Africans telling their own stories, let us start small. Let us, for example, Arthur is talking about the effect of information communication technology.
Yes.
Now you can start a media outlet that is powered by the internet. When it has a radio, TV, and a newspaper, you start small and you expand, like the way Netflix started. Now it is everywhere. But for you to be able to do that, you need an environment that allows that, whereby you're not controlled. If you look in most of these countries, when you start a media outlet of that nature, people will start coming, what is this person up to?
Right.
What story is he going to tell? Then, so the problem in some of African countries is they don't even allow these initiatives to take off unless they are supported by the leader.
Right.
I think it's not an issue of politics.
What's the issue, Arthur?
It's not about politics, like Chris wants to. It's an issue of resources. But Eugene, let's not even dream big. Let's start small. I mean, before you learn how to walk, you need to crawl. Why? You know, every time here in RBA, I get requests from Chinese CCTV. I get requests from VOA. I get requests from even Russia, asking me to carry their content. I mean, if you want stories, please, we're giving you. We're coming and install some equipment at your offices, your headquarters, and be able to pick stories. And the stories I'm picking from CCTV, the Chinese, are stories on the African continent. What's happening in Kenya, South Africa.
Yes.
So I'm saying, why don't we even start by the media outlets in Africa, be able to exchange and share content by ourselves?
But what is stopping this, Arthur?
Why don't I discuss with NTV
yes.
or South Africa, whatever? I pick, if I want a story on whatever, I pick it from their platform. I think what is lacking is that, and we're discussing this at the African Union of Broadcasters. We want to put a platform, on an online platform, where we deposit stories. If a story is happening in Rwanda, for example, we just put there, and any of my colleagues within that grouping, Senegal, whatever, you can go on the platform and pick it and use it free of charge. If I want to sell it, I can sell it. So the only problem has been we have not been organized. Once we get more organized,
and there's been also unnecessary competition.
And the tools, what competition? The tools are there.
Like every media house wants to run on its own. What would be stopping Media House X from sharing content with the other one?
If I get free content from a neighboring country, which I don't have to pay, that's good for me. So I think the problem has been we've not been organized. If you put this platform there and we're able to pick stories, then we're starting. Then you can dream of Aljazeera we're talking about.
All Africa. Stories from 130 African nation media outlets on this platform. But what I think is happening is partly what you're saying. You're not organized because there is competition among people. Whose stories get highlighted more than whose, and the jealousies among nations and all of that. And also, there is also the question, Arthur, of why take stories that are of a substandard level that's in the pool right now versus going with the old boys of Reuters, etc., where the stories are well written already. So again, it comes back to the matter of standard of the journalism. So that's part of it. And secondly,
there are 2 points to this as well.
Yes,
for example, Russian TV. I just want to comment to his point.
Okay, very briefly, not 3 points.
The Russian TV
is
not giving Arthur and others its content because it loves Arthur. It has an ideological interest.
So we Africans don't have
even
one,
the Chinese,
we don't.
Even the Chinese news agency.
Of course,
they want to on our continent. That ideological formation around the news and its influence on the world has not materialized. Finally, the issue of politics is extremely critical because it is through storytelling that you can get or lose power. So that is why I think unless we objectively discuss the question of politics and how it influences the story, we can never have a successful Pan-African media outlets, because if you have it in country
comfortable
X
with what you just
and you
said.
talk about their politics, they will run you out. They will throw you out. If they have been at some extent throwing out big guys from BBC, how about from a small country like Rwanda? If, for example, you are in my country, I will not name a country. If I have a country X and you talk about my politics, and me, I believe the media outlet exists to praise my name, what would you think I will do to you, Kate?
Let me ask.
I will throw you
ask-
out unless you praise my name. So unless we've solved the question of politics,
No, but-
the
but-
issue
but-
of
but
having
Chris-
a successful media outlet, forget.
You're overrating independence as if
I'm not talking about independence.
You're
The
speaking
relationship
about-
between politics and media outlets.
you're speaking about. Actually, the channel that you're speaking about has not seen the day, even wherever. This is an ideal channel that we don't know. Because the channels that we know now, I know at least a president who comes from a place where they have strong media and he fights with journalists for sports. I also know that most of these channels, all these channels as Arthur has enumerated them, are all funded by their own government. You are looking at the media from the School of Journalism, but what they taught you in the School of Journalism is a lie. The truth of the matter, a media is a tool of geopolitics for your own interest. The media you have in your head does not exist. The media is actually, you set up, you invest money in the media.
I have
I don't-
edited the
So
newspaper.
let's talk.
I have,
let me-
I have edited newspaper. 2000
I'm told we
Can
only
we
have
speak?
10 minutes.
Let's go
Actually,
back.
5.
I started the media outlet called the Chronicles. I am not talking from the School of Journalism. I'm talking from practice. Plus,
Yeah, but when-
I,
we're not
have
talking
also,
about-
I have also studied the history of media on the continent. Why?
But Chris brings, just hold your thought, Chris. I mean,
Chris, we're not talking about
Arthur also was, as
a
you as a
channel that's
response
going
to
to
him.
carry. We're talking about a channel that's going to carry stories from 54 or 55 African countries. I mean, even if it's based in Mogadishu.
Burundi.
Eh?
Burundi.
It's not a channel that's going to be talking about Mogadishu.
Suppose you are located in Bujumbura.
Yes.
What story would you carry and they let you live there?
53 countries. Is that not good enough
53
information?
more than what's happening now.
Qatar carries stories for 193 countries. Except, in fact, let's not even talk about 53 countries. The channel we are discussing is not to tell the African story. It's the channel to tell the story. That means we're talking about stories from 193. After you finish 193 countries, and you keep stories that happen in your country secret. That's already a very good achievement, because there's no channel on the world, on the planet, which actually is there for to tell the truth and
All
just
the
be
time.
So
be
you
nice
report
to everyone.
from your bedroom in your country, or you go there, you
You
send it?
overestimate.
I want us to take some minutes and just go through some of the tweets that our viewers have actually been sending. Very, very interesting indeed. I have Innovation Village, and they're saying telling stories must go beyond reporting news and traditional journalism. Culture is US's second largest export, and which is created by Hollywood and made accessible by Silicon Valley.
They say that's a culture.
That we keep on just thinking that news is the only thing to go. Again, we have Mwene Kalinda who says, Natalie is saying in a better way what I've been trying to say. Africans must recount their own story, otherwise we shouldn't be surprised when our story is twisted to a false unidimensionality, and the media role must extend beyond informing and checking government to develop. Rika says, great debate. I agree with starting with sharing current content of African stories, and that brings it to Arthur. What is stopping us from having done that for a very long time? For example, carrying in focus on multi-platforms in the continent, for example. What is difficult doing?
I think we've just lacked leadership on this. It's not an issue of course, I wouldn't rule out also resources. But we used to have what Chris told you, the African News Agency, also Africa Online. But you find that, you know, at the end of the day, there's no common understanding and a common vision to drive this initiative to bigger heights. So for me, the issue has been mainly to do with we are very uncoordinated. We think so domestically, we think about ourselves only, and you're so preoccupied with your domestic issues that every morning when I wake up, I'm thinking about what's going to be on RBA platform and how am I going to improve it and how am I going to be able to bring in something new. I don't have the time to think regionally, I don't have time to interact with other people. So I think it's high time that we came up with a way of how we discuss these things. And that's why I'm happy to be part of. We're discussing how should we be able to share content across the continent
and think beyond our own
think beyond our territories. But even then, it needs strong leadership and a lot of time and resources also.
Right, Natalie. I mean, because we are also being told time is up. Arthur seems to be diplomatically also saying, I know if I'm not correct, you'll also correct me, saying that if we have not been able to handle the small item that is in our plate, you know, the coordination issue, the thinking beyond just our own territories, how then are we going to be able to handle this continental platform?
Because one of the things he said is it needs leadership. So you need a Paul Kagame of journalism in the region. You need somebody to take this. So Arthur, this might be your thing for 2018 into 2019. Take charge of what needs to be done. It's not that it cannot be done. It needs leadership to happen. And I think Arthur is looking as though he wants to say, yes, this is something he'll ensure become part of his legacy.
Yes, Gatete.
So there are some African world-class journalists out there on these other channels that we've named today. You have, you know, the best journalists. Some of them are Africans. Technicians are we have African technicians. The skills are there, and more is needed, indeed.
But Gatete, you say these skills are there, but already Natalie and others out there think that even with the current media that we have, they still lack in the professionalism.
We need money, Eugene. We need money. We need one person to be convinced and put the money on the table. Everything else is available. None of these channels employ exclusively citizens of their country.
For once, I agree with 100%.
For once.
We need the money. We need what? Currently, this discussion has been going on since independence.
Right.
But the only thing that has not happened, so there's pros and cons,
yes.
And we can continue. This now we only need one more argument. We need money. We need at least $300 million. Every leader on the African continent can have that money. They can have it in. They can create a levy. They can create a tax. In the BBC, people in the UK have a tax for it. I don't know how they will get the money, but let us the money. And then when we have the money, Africans who can actually get this running will be available.
Why don't you start a GoFundMe and probably this money will just...
This is money, this is not small money. We need a head of state. We need a head of state on the African continent. The next time I have an opportunity to speak to an African head of state, I will tell them, now we need the money now.
We need the money. Dr. Kayumba, what else do we need? Is this just money as we close?
I think actually money is important, but I don't think it's the most critical element to have a viable Pan-African news. Because, I mean, how do media outlets succeed? Media outlets succeed when you have a vision of what you need to do.
No, they succeed with content. And you need money for good content.
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. If you look at how media outlets succeed, it is not a question of money. Some media outlets start small, with small money. When you have a vision and you have an environment that allows you to do what you do in a sustainable manner, you will succeed. If you have a lot of money and you don't have the environment that allows you to produce the kind of content he's talking about, this Pan-African News Agency does produce content. No one wants to look at this.
So money is not a priority?
Money is
a big priority. It is a major priority.
Let me tell you. My parting shot?
Yes, your parting shot.
Forget about the lack of skills. We have skills. What we lack is money. Put the money there, I agree with Gatete, and something will come out.
And ask us the skills.
So what are we going to do to get that money? I mean, as we move forward. I mean, down there?
I think the most important thing is that we have started this conversation. It's very good. It's ongoing. It's going across the continent. And I'm really happy that our leader, President Kagame, has talked about it several times at our
He
last
seemed
meeting
to
here.
pledge some money too.
It is actually his time.
No, and I know he has had some engagements with even some people in the private sector across
Yes.
Africa to see how we can put up this continent. This conversation, the more the political elite on the continent see it and understand the importance of it, and they inject money into it.
Right.
But my parting shot.
That's your parting shot.
No, my parting shot. No.
Okay, give me your parting shot very quickly because I know you're the boss.
Quite,
It's time.
no, quite
You
different.
cannot cut you off there.
Quite different. I don't know why. I mean, and it came into my mind. I think I'm really thrilled, and we should be congratulating the leadership of this country for bringing the Commonwealth Heads of State Summit in 2020. It's a very big achievement. It's going to be a big platform for Rwanda, and I think everyone should be proud of it.
Okay.
I want to mention this before I go.
Thank you. I'm going to invoice you in my own way for speaking about something that is not related to the conversation for tonight. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much, Natalie Gatete and Dr. Kayumba. Of course, Kenneth Agutamba says, Lo Gatete raised the 300 million and it will be stolen. This is what he feels. So there's trust issues amongst us.
No, that is a pertinent issue. I mean, corruption is a
Corruption
big
is still an issue.
on the continent.
It's an issue everywhere.
Okay, this conversation seemingly has to go on. Of course, we want to say a big thank you for tuning in. Keep talking. Let's find solutions. Gatete and Asimwe say that money is really needed. Of course, Natalie, but Dr. Kayumba feels that there is a lot more than just the money. What do you think should be done to actually have this platform, if we really need it? Keep talking. #InFocusRW. The conversation goes on. My name, as always, is Eugene and Angwe. Good night.